Hello, welcome to the 30k channel. I'm your host David, and in today's game we have Dark Angels versus World Eaters. I'd like to say welcome to Andy and Stuart. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Great to have you here. Now, these guys have put in some extra special effort. They came down the night before, stayed over in a hotel locally. We went out for a curry last night. It was a spot of tea or dinner, gents. Which is it?
I think it's dinner, man. It's got to be dinner.
It's tea. I'll talk you down. You'll have to change your mind a bit.
We had something to eat, regardless of your preference, which was really nice. And then we started at the channel nice and early, 9 o'clock, bright and early, got everything set up, ready to go. Gents, thank you so much for the effort you've put in today and yesterday. I'm quite looking forward to this, Dark Angels World Eaters.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely a close combat bloodbath, I think.
Yeah, we've played each other quite a bit in the past, but as it turns out, Stu's never played this army before, and his army's brand new, so it's a different experience for the pair of us.
Definitely.
It's good, and it's really interesting because we're filming on Saturday, and yesterday the book 9 Crusade was announced, and everyone in the world pre-ordered book 9.
I was one of them. I'll hold my hands up straight away.
Yeah.
Book 9, Lion, straight in there.
Yeah, me too. So that's really exciting as well. So you might ask, well, why are we filming a game the day after the new books are released? Well, the fact of the matter is, when we booked this game, we had no idea when book 9 was going to be released. So we figured, well, it's better to get Dark Angels on than not have them. But it's kind of worked out the way it's worked out. but what we might do is we might ask Stuart to come back in a few months or whenever he can with new book and new rules.
Definitely, I think that's we'll see how it goes. I'm very excited about the book. It's going to be it's the Dark Angels Legion out. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
It is exciting times. Now, we're going to talk through the list very, very quickly. We're going to start with Andy, though. Andy, you've brought a massively troop-heavy list supported by 2 Caestus.
Yeah, so I always wanted my World Eaters to fit the background. I always imagined them being a tidal wave of infantry heading towards my opponent. But a lot of the World Eaters' background says that they're supported by faster vehicles to give them a little bit of anti-tank. So I've got land speeders in my list. I've got the Caestus because they're, in the background for the Caestus, it always mentions that only the craziest, the most the most dangerous legions will use that and take that chance to use them. So I've put the most bloodthirsty fighters in my legion in the Terminators in those Caestus assault rams, and they're going to hopefully back up the infantry and give the Dark Angels something to think about as the game goes on, that they're not just going to be trying to mow down hordes of World Eaters.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tricky for the World Eaters because they've got to make ground on the Dark Angels, and the Dark Angels have got a ton of vehicles. But then, obviously, in later turns, as you mentioned, your reserves will come in the form of the Caestus and the Red Butchers, and then we might see a bit of a bloom from the World Eaters sort of turn 3 onwards. Stuart, talk to me about your Dark Angels. I don't think we've had them on the channel, but maybe once before on the channel, but definitely new for us, and you've got a ton of the new stuff as well.
Yeah, so basically the Dark Angels list, as we said earlier, the book's not out yet, so it's a bit of everything, bit of Iron Wing and Death Wing is kind of the thing we're going for. So vets, I've got the Terminators, I've got the Plasmas, and I wanted that Iron Wing feel of tanks. So I think it would just be a case of trying to hold this wave back with this list. Definitely,
it's going to be interesting because you've got a lot of the plasma casters, haven't you? The Strength 4 AP2 plasma casters and those types of weaponry. But then you've also got a really big squad of heavy bolters with molecular acid rounds. So I think you've got a good couple of turns of shooting before the World Eaters get to grips with you.
Yeah, I definitely. The plan is to hold them back with that line of fire. The Plasmas, I'm gonna have to get in close. I fully know that, but hopefully we'll punish the World Eaters for trying to get into combat first before they can actually get a go with their axes. And the heavy bolters, molecular acid is one of those things that does work with the heavy support squad. So I think I could hold them at bay with them as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And if we look to the mission that we're doing a real classic Dawn of War with Dominion. I think it works really well because both armies have got a huge amount of troops and vehicles in them. We need to just spread them out rather than squash them into kind of an odd deployment zone. And commendable efforts from these two guys because they've put the objectives outside of the deployment zone, so they cannot be scored on turn 1. So, gents, thank you so much for that. I think it is a bit of a crazy mechanic that you can just camp on your baseline and score points as you go along through the game. It just means you've got to work a little bit harder for them, I guess, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We have to get into each other's grills to get those points.
There's going to be a balance as well, because we know that we need to kill each other, but at the same time we can't go too far because of the nature of where we've put the objectives across the midline almost. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of contact at some point in this game. I think there's going to be like a peak turn where it all kind of hinges.
Yeah. And if we just quick look at the board as well, when I designed the board initially for the Raven Guard World Eaters game, I designed it to be played over Hammer and Anvil. Now, because we are playing Dawn of War, there was a lot of gaps, which line of sight, which need to be blocked. So the Thunderhawk, the Mechanicum Thunderhawk, has made an appearance after about 6 months of sitting on the shelf. The Thunderhawk is back, and that has definitely put some cover between the two units, and will kind of funnel where the in particular the Dark Angels vehicles will go. So that might help or hinder the World Eaters, I'm not sure, but it will certainly funnel the vehicles into a kind of a shooting gallery, I guess. The other thing to mention, of course, is the deployment. You know, Andy, you've just got a wall of troops and 2 Contemptors, Cortus.
Yeah, I think because I know Stu's likely to get first turn, I'm going to have to hope that the cover does enough for me early doors, and then kind of, you know, make up for the elevated ground really, in hope that Stu at some point is close enough for me to get to grips with him. Which he's going to have to do, because a lot of his stuff's in tanks right now. So and they're not the areas where the objectives are. They're not really all that tank friendly. So I think he's got to get out. He's not going to be able to just sit in the tank, which helps me a little bit.
I think the Dark Angels are excited to get out and have some fun.
And consequently as well, you know, Stuart, you've just got a wall of tanks, and those heavy bolters are in a really prized position, aren't they? They've got good line of fire.
That's it. I wanted the high ground for the heavy bolters, I think, looking at the deployment. But at the same time, yeah, I've got to move the tanks around, and I'm gonna have to be careful of how I do that. Yeah. Because I mean, there's 2 Contemptors on the board. They're quite happy to get involved with my tanks. And especially, I've got to be thinking about about the Kestuses coming on as well. Yeah,
those Red Butchers, 2 wounds apiece, and they are formidable in combat, and they can put out a hell of a number of attacks. So I think when they come in, you've got a Strength 8 AP1 blast, and then the wing-mounted rockets, and then you've got the gear inside, which can come on, for a turn 3, turn 4 charge. So it's going to be quite interesting how the reserves roll for the World Eaters are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be quite key.
Maybe not the most important rule of the game, but maybe the most important role of the game.
Now, regarding Deploy First, Go First, the Dark Angels won the role to Deploy First, Go First, which is good for the Dark Angels. Now, Andy, are you going to have a seize?
I'm going to try.
You're going to give it a go. I'll hand you the box. You've got some dice in there, haven't you? So give us a roll and let us know the result.
2.
That's it. I'll take that.
Happy about the first one, Stuart?
Definitely, I think I'll have my first crack at the World Eaters.
All right, good stuff. All right, well, let's get into it. Dark Angels, turn 1.
This is a 3,000 point Dark Angels list led by a Legion Praetor, using the Right of War prior to the Legion, and the Warlord trait is Child of Terror. This army is led by the Praetor Hulkwyn, who's commander of the Dreadwing. He's equipped in the Dreadbringer's Aegis, which is Cataphracti plate armor. He has the Viridian Blade and a Volkite Charger. Elite's choice is starting with a Contemptor, equipped with the Heavy Bolter with molecular acid rounds and a close combat weapon. The next squad is the Dreadwing Interemptor squad, which is a 10-man squad, 8 of which are equipped with plasma burners and 2 with plasma incinerators. Dedicated transport is the Land Raider Armoured Proteus, with the las cannon sponsons and heavy bolter. For troop choice, we have a 10-man veteran tactical squad, all equipped with close combat weapons, bolters and bolt pistols. Sergeant with artifice armour and dedicated transport is a Legion Rhino carrier. Next troop choice is the Dark Angels Inner Circle Knights, a 10-man squad equipped with Tranic greatswords and plasma casters. These have got the Icon of Resolve, and the dedicated transport is a Spartan assault tank with a flare shield and quad las cannons. Moving into fast attack choice, we have 2 Legion Sabre strike tanks, both of them equipped identically with the Neutron Blaster and heavy bolters. Moving into the heavy support slot, we have the 3 Predator Squadron, all with the exact same layout of the Predator Cannon Heavy Bolters. Next slot we have the Leviathan Siege Dreadnought. He is equipped with a Storm Cannon, a Leviathan Siege Claw with the Phosphex launcher. 2 Twin Link Volkites in the chest mount. And finally, the last slot is filled by the Heavy Support Squad, 10-man squad, all equipped with Heavy Bolters and the Molecular Acid upgrade rounds.
This is a 3,000 point World Eaters army with the Berserker Assault Rite of War, led by a Warlord with the Paladin of Glory Warlord trait. The army is led by a Legion Praetor with a Paragon Blade, Artificer Armour, Melter Bombs and an Iron Halo. And he's accompanied by a Champion with Artificer Armour, a Mastercrafted Chain Axe, Melter Bombs, Combat Shield and Jump Pack. In the Elite section we have 2 Apothecaries, one of whom has a Power Sword, the other is armed with a Chain Axe. Each Apothecary accompanies a Tactical Squad. Another elite selection is 2 units of 5 Red Butchers, led by a Devoured with dual Chain Fists, and each squad member is armed with dual power axes. The final elite selection is a claw of 2 Contemptor Cortus class Dreadnoughts, armed with Kadiri style weaponry represented by 2 Dreadnought close combat weapons with inbuilt bolters. In the troops choices we have 2 10-man assault squads with jump packs. One squad includes 2 plasma pistols and the sergeant's armed with a power axe. The second squad is armed exclusively with chain axes. Also in the troops section we have 2 20-man tactical squads. One squad is led by a sergeant with a heavy chain blade. The sergeant with the heavy chain blade also has melter bombs. And the second squad is led by a sergeant with a power fist. In fast attack we have 2 squadrons of javelin land speeders. One squadron is armed with missile launchers and heavy bolters. The second squadron is armed with Lars cannons and multi-melters. In heavy support we've got 2 Cestus assault rams with twin wing mounted missile launchers, which will be carrying the Red Butchers.
Dark Angels turn 1 movement phase. So started off with the Contemptor and the Leviathan marching towards the World Eaters on the hill. The Heavy Bolter squad stayed where they are. The Predator squadron moving up to get some shots off, with the Armoured Proteus backing them up. The Spartan and the Rhino both moving up to start engaging with the World Eaters, and the Sabres trying to get a position to shoot. Dark Angels turn 1 shooting. Saw the Heavy Support squad opening fire onto the World Eaters Assault Marines. With the Thunderhawk heavy cover, only 6 of them could see, so they opened fire, scoring a number of AP 1, 2 and 3 heavy bolter hits. Regardless of the amount of sheer weight of fire coming from them, it only downed 2 World Eaters. The next up to open fire is the Leviathan, with its Storm Cannon, shooting into the World Eaters Assault Marines again, and just brought 1 down with the sheer weight of fire. So next was the Contemptor to open fire with the Molecular Acid round. AP 5, it managed to hit and wound 3 of the Marines, but the World Eaters just shrugged it off their armour this time. Dark Angels Tank Squadron was next to open up with the Predators using their Predator cannons against the Assault Marines. 8 shots, of which 6 scored wounds. All of them were taken by the champion like a pro and just bounced off harmlessly. Next on the Predators to open fire is the Heavy Bolter sponsons, of which 3 could actually see and shoot, scoring 4 wounds on the squad. 2 of them were passed off onto the squad and saved. The other 2 wounds hit the champion, of which 1 went through that armour and caused a wound. So after the Predators, we moved on to the Sabre Strike Squadron, opening up with their Heavy Bolters onto the Tactical Squad, scoring 5 hits, of which 1 wound went through and the Apothecary failed to save the Marine. End of the shooting phase for the Dark Angels. Due to the wounds caused onto that Assault Squad, they had to take a morale check, of which fortunately for me, they have failed, and causing them to flee with the champion off the table. End of turn 1 for the Dark Angels. Personally, I feel that we achieved a victory on the right flank, and we're definitely pushing up. So overall, a good turn 1.
World Eaters turn 1 movement phase. So the Marines started to move towards the objectives, supported by the Contemptor Dreadnoughts. The right flank at the moment appears to be very much in Dark Angel hands, so we're going to wait and see if we get some reserves next turn and push towards the main bulk of objectives in the centre of the board. So World Eaters turn 1 shooting phase. All of the units try to run, with the Contemptors pushing furthest forward. The assault squad and tactical squad have managed to get onto the objectives, whereas on my left flank, the World Eaters didn't quite get far enough to make a difference to closing the distance between them and the Dark Angels. So the Contemptor pushed a little bit further forward, but maintained the cover from the tanks. As regards the close combat phase, we don't have any close combat to do, so the World Eater's turn ends there.
Turn 2 for Dark Angels, movement phase. Sabres have pushed up at full speed to try to get some shots off against the Contemptor. The Rhino and the Veterans coming in to support and getting out ready to unleash bolt of fire onto the World Eaters. Holquin and his Terminators have decided to face the World Eaters head on and disembark from the Spartan to contest the objectives. The Predators and the Leviathan have pushed up to try to start making a sweep round on the World Eaters, with the Contemptor coming in to assist. The Heavy Bolter squad has stayed stationary in their prime position at the moment. Dark Angels turn 2 shooting phase started with the Predators opening up with their Predator cannons onto the Dreadnought. 8 shots, of which 6 hit, but nothing managed to glance it. Next up was the Leviathan to open fire onto that Dreadnought, starting off with a Storm Cannon, which rattled off its 6 shots towards it, managing to glance 1 hull point off of the Contemptor. The Melter Gun opening up and just completely shooting wide of its target. The Land Raider opening up with the sponson that can see its las cannon, making it through the defence line and through the front plate of the Dreadnought to take another hull point off it. The Sabres opening fire with their Neuron Blasters towards the Contemptor, one of which managed to hit its target but couldn't get through the atomic shielding. Dark Angels Vets opening fire into the Tactical Squad with 20 bolter rounds, managing to hit with 11, wound with 3 and only kill 1 thanks to the Apothecary save. The Dark Angels Rhino, supporting its squad, just opened fire but didn't manage to wound anything. At the end of the Dark Angel shooting phase, the Contemptor ran 6 inches to help support the Leviathan. Dark Angels Assault on turn 2. The Terminators coming out of the Spartan, trying to charge those World Eaters. Assault Marines have absolutely failed the charge, leaving them in a critical position out in that open. So end of turn 2 for the Dark Angels. Overall, not a great turn compared to the first, but we've still made progress up the board, but failing that charge has been a critical point for the army this turn.
World Eaters movement phase turn 2 started really well when 3 of the reserve units turned up in the 2 Cestus assault rams and the land speeders armed with las cannons. The World Eaters managed to reinforce the right flank with those flying units and shore up the left. Because of the failed charge, the Dreadnoughts have turned their attention to the large squad of Terminators approaching the objectives, and the wedge of infantry in the centre has forced its way towards the tanks. On the left flank, the tactical squad is trying to take advantage of the weaker armour of the Sabre tanks, whilst another Cestus assault ram turns its attentions to the Veterans in the Rhino. Using the automatic reactors, the Contemptor Quartus Dreadnoughts have brought on a rage this turn so that they can make a better job of finishing off the Terminators. World Eaters turn 2 shooting phase started with the Cestus on the right flank, firing at the Heavy Bolter squad with its Magna Cannon and crack rockets. The Magna Cannon wounded 4 Marines, killing them off, and the crack rocket killed another one. The land speeders were the next thing to fire in the World Eater shooting phase, firing at the Leviathan Dreadnought, making its way up the hill. They shot into the flank with the las cannons, managing to penetrate the hull and immobilise the Dreadnought. The multi-melters had no real effect. Next up was the assault squad firing into the Predators that they're intending to assault later in the turn. 2 plasma pistols fired. Unfortunately, one of them overheated and killed the bearer of the pistol, with no hits scored on the tanks. As they continued their advance, the Contemptor Quartus Dreadnoughts fired their bolters into the inner circle, with the inner circle managing to make all the saves and suffering no casualties this turn. The Cestus on the left flank opened fire at the Dark Angels Veteran squad, with the Magna Melter killing 7 Marines, and a final crack rocket hit the Sergeant and managed to bounce off his artificer armour. The Rhino was also caught in the blast, which damaged the bolters and took a hull point off. World Eaters turn 2 assault phase, starting on the left flank. The tactical squad have made a charge against the Sabre tanks, managing to make contact with both tanks. In the centre, the Inner Circle Knights who failed that charge have been assaulted by both Contemptor Quartus dreadnoughts. Across to the Predator tanks on the right flank, where the assault squad have jumped over the top of the bastion and assaulted all three tanks in hope of wrecking each tank this turn. Starting with the combat between the Sabre tanks and the tactical squad. The tactical squad had 68 attacks, of which 54 hit, causing a great deal of damage on the tanks, with 14 penetrating hits and 7 glancing hits, wrecking both tanks. The combat between the Assault Marines and the Predator tanks again went in the World Eater's favour, with 36 attacks causing 25 hits, which then led to 6 penetrating hits and 4 glancing hits, wrecking the entire squadron. Combat between the Contemptor Quartus dreadnoughts and the Inner Circle Knights started with 2 Hammer of Wrath attacks, which were saved by the Inner Circle. Combat between the Contemptor Quartus dreadnoughts and the Inner Circle Knights started initiative 4 with the dreadnoughts, as the Knights were unable to penetrate the armour of the Contemptor Quartus. They each had 6 attacks, following the 3 base attacks, +1 for 2 close combat weapons and +2 for rage. The 12 attacks led to 9 hits, which then wounded 7 and eventually killed 3 Knights following the saving throws. Continuing the combat between the Contemptor Quartus and the Inner Circle Knights, the Knights had a -3 leadership test to take, which they failed, fleeing the combat, and the Contemptor Quartus managed to consolidate 3 inches following the Knights. The overcharged reactor on the Contemptor Quartus ignited at the end of the turn, taking its final hull point, which engulfed 5 Knights in atomantic fire. Unfortunately for the World Eaters, those Knights have managed their armour saves this turn. End of turn 2 for the World Eaters. That was a fairly epic turn, with the battle really swinging around the fulcrum in the centre. The Contemptor Quartus have took out probably the most powerful squad in the game, and they've managed to take out 2 squadrons of tanks, which should really blunt the Dark Angels for the remainder of the game, as the World Eaters look to consolidate their grip on the objectives.
Dark Angels turn 3 movement has started by the Contemptor moving in for a clean position to charge the World Eaters Assault Marines. The Heavy Bolter squad staying stationary to open fire later. The Armoured Proteus has now turned its attention to the Contemptor in order to assist the Knights in trying to deal with that threat. The Knights have regrouped and consolidated just to move them into that coherence. The Spartan backing up to get las cannon shots on the Dreadnought. The Rhino has just moved itself into shield a little bit of the vets while they have tried to get into the cover of the rocks. Dark Angels turn 3 shooting started with a heavy support squad opening fire with the heavy bolters. Molecular acid rounds, two of the heavy bolters became AP1 and the rest were AP3 and above, hailing down a storm of bullets onto the World Eaters Assault Marines and killing 3 of them in the process. Next up to shoot was the Contemptor, unleashing its heavy bolter, which became AP6 due to molecular acid. Managed to score 2 hits, but some miraculous saves by the World Eaters did no damage. Next up to shoot was the Leviathan, unleashing its Phosphex payload towards the tactical squad, though landing a total of 10 hits. Thanks to the Apothecary's hard work, we only actually killed 3. So the Volkite, the Storm Cannon unleashing its load towards the World Eaters. The Apothecary putting in some hard work here and only allowing 3 men to drop at the end. The Dark Angels Land Raider Armoured Proteus, turning its las cannons towards that Contemptor that threatened the Inner Circle Knights, firing both of its shots, the penetrating shot going through and into the armour and destroying the Contemptor in a fantastic shot. The Spartans declared its shots towards the Kestis Assault Ram. The Kestis didn't jink, but unfortunately with the snap firing it didn't hit on those las cannons. The Heavy Bolter with the Machine Spirit opened fire towards the tactical squad, managing to knock another man down for the World Eaters. The next squad up is the Dark Angel Veterans, who use their bolters towards the tactical squad, managing to get 2 hits in, but both just bounced off the armour of the World Eaters harmlessly. Dark Angels Assault Phase on turn 3. The Contemptor going into those World Eater Assault Marines. There was no Overwatch to be done. The Contemptor's Hammer of Wrath did nothing this turn. Going in initiative 4, the Power Fist came down and smashed 3 Assault Marines.
Okay, in World Eater's retaliation, the Sergeant desperately tried to attach a melter bomb to the Dreadnought. Despite his hatred rule, he's managed to fail to attach the melter bomb and cause no damage.
The end of the combat saw the Contemptor sweep down the World Eater Assault Marines and then turn his attention and consolidate 5 inches towards those javelins. End of turn 3 for the Dark Angels. Started off slightly rocky, but now they're finding their feet and they're pushing themselves back against that World Eater onslaught of white.
So World Eater's turn 3, the land speeders have arrived from reserve and made their way onto the left flank, facing towards the Land Raider Proteus. The tactical squad, which has spent the last turn killing off a squadron of tanks, is moving up towards the veterans. The Cestus Assault Ram has went into hover mode and divulged its cargo of Red Butcher Terminators who are heading towards the Knights. The tactical squad in the centre spread out a little in order to cover the objectives, remembering the scenario that we're playing. And the land speeders on the right flank have went to outflank the Dreadnought, along with the second Cestus Assault Ram, which has turned its attentions to the back of the Leviathan Dreadnought, letting go of its Red Butchers whilst in hover mode, who are moving towards the heavy weapon squad on the cliff. World Eater's turn 3 shooting. The tactical squad opened fire on the remaining 3 veterans, managing to score 2 wounds, which were both saved by the Sergeant's Artificer Armour. Cestus Assault Ram opened fire on the Knights, the Magna Melter doing no damage as the Knights managed to save the 1 Knight that was hit, and the Flare Shield preventing the Magna Melter from having any effect on the Land Raider. The Crack Rockets managed to hit a single Knight, wounding him, but he made his save. The newly arrived land speeders fired at the Land Raider Proteus, but unfortunately failed to penetrate the armour with 3 hits. Cestus on the right flank fired its Magna Melter towards the Leviathan Dreadnought, which despite a penetrating hit failed to do any damage because of the adamantic shielding. This also clipped the flank of the Contemptor Dreadnought, which failed to cause a penetrating hit. 2 crack rockets fired at the back of the Leviathan Dreadnought caused a glancing hit, which was also saved. Next up were the Javelin Land Speeders, which fired towards the flank of the Contemptor Dreadnought. Unfortunately, the melter guns, the multi-melters, were saved by the Contemptor shielding. A follow-up shot with the last cannons managed to take out the Dreadnought's legs, immobilising it for the rest of the game and causing a hull point of damage. World Eater's turn 3 combat phase began with the tactical squad assaulting the veterans around the Rhino. The veterans fired their bolt pistols into the World Eaters but caused no casualties on Overwatch. This moved along to the Red Butchers, who charged into the Inner Circle Knights. The Inner Circle Knights, through their plasma weaponry, fired into the Terminators, causing a number of wounds, but each wound was saved. On the right-hand flank, another unit of Red Butchers charged up the cliffs, overcoming the difficult terrain and a hail of fire, which they saved, barring a single wound to one of the troopers, and made it into combat with the heavy weapon squad. The Red Butchers started the combat phase, causing a huge amount of damage on the heavy weapon squad, who caused no damage in return. The Red Butchers then consolidated 3 inches towards the Dreadnoughts. Combat phase between the World Eater's tactical squad and the Dark Angels veterans started with the initiative 4.
Dark Angels veterans struck out with 4 attacks, hitting twice but failing to do any wounds.
The World Eaters attacked at initiative 4, hacking down the remaining veteran Marines and consolidating an inch. Combat between the Red Butchers and the Inner Circle Knights, starting with initiative step 5. There was a challenge issued by the Red Butchers Devoured against Holgwyn, the Dark Angels commander.
First, initiative 5 is Holgwyn, who's getting 5 attacks back with the Viridian Blade against the Devoured. He is hitting on 3s with a Mastercrafted weapon. So rerolling 1 for the Mastercrafted. So that's 4 hits. Because of the Viridian Blade, he's at strength 6 against the toughness 4 of the Devoured. 2s to wound. So that caused 2 wounds. Because of his Child of Terror, it allows me to reroll 1s to wound, so I get to reroll them again. So that's 3 wounds in total.
The Devoured tries to make his invulnerable saves of a 4+, of which he makes 1. He's then got Feel No Pain of a 6, which he makes 1 of, leaving him alive at the end of initiative step 5.
Next to go is the Inner Circle Knights at initiative 4. Each of them get 2 attacks apiece. However, because of the Icon of Resolve, they're going at 3 attacks each. Only 6 of them are in combat range. They're using Tyrannic Greatswords, so it's because of weapon skill 5, it's 3s to hit, and then it's 2s to wound because they're at strength 6. So 18 attacks. $14 hits. And now 2s to wound with a reroll on 1s for Child of Terror. Pass on to the unit. 14 wounds, no reroll.
The Red Butchers roll their 14 saves on a 2+, of which they make every save bar 1. This led to 1 Red Butcher being killed. So now in initiative step 1, the Red Butchers get to retaliate with the power axes. Each Red Butcher starts with 2 base attacks, gains an additional 2 for rage and another 1 for having 2 close combat weapons, which would mean that each Red Butcher has 5 attacks, leading me to fight back with 15 attacks. So 15 attacks requiring 4s to hit, with a reroll for hatred. So that is 12 hits. The Red Butchers are also strength 6 because of the power axes, so they will wound on 2s. Rerolling 1s for fails because of the World Eaters rules. There's 6 1s, 7 1s there, so it's a good job that they're rerolling them. And now there's only 1, so 11 saves from the Inner Circle using their invulnerable save.
A lot of saves to make for the Dark Angel Inner Circle Knights, starting with the 7 Inner Circle Knights that are left using their 4-up invuln save and rolling those 7 dice, of which 3 die. Now as we're down to 4 knights, just going to roll those dice with the 4-up Cataphractic Blade. Another 1 dies.
Returning to the challenge at initiative step 1, the Devoured attacks with 6 attacks because of 2 from Hatred, 3 base attacks and 2 for 2 close combat weapons. The Devoured misses 2 attacks and rerolls them for Hatred. He continues to miss those. He rolls his 4 hits, wounding on 2s because the chain axes is strength 8. And he makes 4 wounds.
So Hulkwyn for the Dark Angel is going to try to take these and fight through it. So we're going to start one at a time. Because of the chain axes, it is vital that he tries to make these saves. Starting for the first one. Doesn't make the save. So that will be Hulkwyn gone. So because of the Devoured's weapon strength, it is instant killed Hulkwyn, laying that pretty low. And the other 3 wounds that were caused will spill over to the unit, which I'll roll now at the 4-up invuln save. And 1 more Inner Circle Knight goes as well.
The Red Butchers have won the combat by 5, also losing their commander, which has reduced their leadership to the leadership of the squad, which is 9, so they're going to need a 4 or less to pass the morale check.
Dark Angel's Inner Circle Knights are going to try to hold their ground in the face of this loss. 2 dice, needing under 4 for this. And they roll a 5, unfortunately. So they are running.
In a grand anti-climax to the combat, because of the cataphracti armour worn by the Red Butchers, they're unable to sweep and advance the Deathwing Inner Circle. So the Deathwing are going to run 2d6 away, and the Red Butchers should be able to consolidate following this.
Inner Circle Knights falling back away from the Red Butchers, 2d6. And they are going 7.
And the Red Butchers consolidate 5 inches towards the closest thing that they can harm, which in this case is going to be the Land Raider spawn. So World Eaters turn 3 review. That turn was a bit of a mixed bag for the World Eaters. The shooting phase was a bit underwhelming, but I think that the Red Butchers more than made up for it with their pursuit of the Inner Circle Knights. Hopefully next turn we should be able to mop things up with the Dreadnoughts as they're both immobilised, and make a bit more progress on the Inner Circle, and hopefully do some damage to the 2 remaining Land Raiders.
Dark Angel's turn 4 movement has started with the Land Raider armoured Proteus moving up and deploying its payload of Interruptors into the front lines and ready to shoot at those Red Butchers. At the same time, the Leviathans and Contemptor can't move at the moment, so she's going to try to lay some fire out where it is. The Inner Circle Knights have rallied and are now facing again towards the Red Butchers, and the Spartan has backed away a bit from those chain fists. Dark Angels turn 4 shooting started with the Intrepida squad shooting their plasma burners and incinerators towards the Red Butchers. For the D3 on how many shots, I rolled a 2, which meant a total of 36 shots from the squad, of which 24 hit and 13 went through to wound. For the saves, the Red Butchers lost 6 wounds in total, leaving the squad at 2 models. Next up to shoot was the Dark Angels Land Raider Armoured Proteus. Its las cannons aiming towards the Kestis, which decided not to chink. Firing both of them, one pen got through, but because of the invuln save, it was stopped at that point. The Heavy Bolter targeting the Red Butchers, but failing to do a wound. The Inner Circle Knights were next to shoot, targeting against the Red Butchers. Because they've just rallied, they were snap shooting, so they failed to hit with their plasma casters against their target. So the Leviathan Dreadnought shooting the tactical Marine squad that are holding the objectives, opening fire with the Volkites first, but failed to do a wound. With the Storm Cannon, it managed to kill 4 of the Marines. Frustratingly, there's no leadership check required due to the Warlord's trait of Paladin of Glory, making the unit fearless. Next to shoot was the Contemptor, who opened fire with the Heavy Bolter against the Javelins and scored 1 glancing hit against them, which resulted in 1 whole point lost. Finally, for the Dark Angels, the Spartan opened fire against the Cestus, deciding not to jink. The Spartan managed to get 1 hit on it, which glanced, taking 1 whole point from it as the invuln save wasn't made. Power of the Machine Spirit on the Heavy Bolter to use it to fire at the Red Butchers, causing 2 wounds, but it couldn't get through that Cataphractii armor. End of turn 4 for the Dark Angels. It's on the back foot at the moment, struggling to try to get rid of this wave of white that is coming towards us, but still trying to hold strong in the face of the Traitor Legion.
World Eater's turn 4 movement phase started with the Red Butchers moving towards the Spartan to attempt an assault later. The tactical squad moved around the Rhino in attempt to fire some bolt pistols at the Deathwing Knights. The Land Speeders trying to come up behind the Land Raider Proteus in order to get the odd shot off at the Plasma Squad, the Interemptors. The Kestis Assault Rams have kind of switched positions so that the left flank Cestus is going to fire at the Dreadnoughts, and the right flank Cestus is going to also fire at the Interemptors to try and save the Red Butchers. The Red Butchers attempted to make their way onto the plateau above the Interemptors, but unfortunately ruled a poor difficult terrain roll of a single inch, so haven't really moved. The Land Speeders have tried to reposition themselves so they can fire at the rear of the Leviathan as it continues to mow down the Tactical Marines, who've pulled back into cover in the centre of the board. The Tactical Marines redeployed slightly to make better use of the cover, while they scored another victory point at the start of the turn for the objective they've held for the last 3 turns. World Eater shooting phase turn 4. The Tactical Marines fire towards the Inner Circle Knights, managing to hit them 6 times, wound 4 times, and unfortunately they made all of their armour saves. Cestus Assault Ram fires its Magna Melter towards the 2 Dreadnoughts, which unfortunately scattered away from them. It followed that up with a crack missile into the back of the Contemptor Dreadnought, which unfortunately didn't manage to penetrate the armour. On the other side of the Dreadnoughts, the two Land Speeders fired the multi-melters into the back of the Leviathan Dreadnought. Again, unfortunately failing to penetrate the armour in one instance and having the second shot saved. They then fired the las cannons, which led to a single penetrating hit, which resulted in another vehicle immobilised result, causing an additional hull point of damage, leaving it with a single hull point. The Cestus Assault Ram fired at the Interemptors using its Magna Melter. It managed to hit and clip the front of the hull of the Land Raider Proteus. which caused a penetrating hit. And after killing 6 of the Interemptors, the Land Raider also exploded. Fortunately, the rest of the squad managed to make the saves from the resulting explosion. Following up the fire from the Cestus assault ram, the land speeders fired into the remaining Interemptors, firing some frag missiles in. This caused 6 wounds, of which a single Marine died. Following that, they opened up with the heavy bolters, killing another Marine. The resulting leadership test was passed by the Interemptors, and they remained stoic in front of the Cestus assault ram. So World Eater's turn 4 assault phase began with the large tactical squad on the left flank making an attempted assault towards the Deathwing inner circle, which they failed on a double 1. They didn't suffer any casualties from the resulting Overwatch fire. Following that, the Red Butchers assaulted the Land Raider Spartans successfully. Combat between the World Eaters, Red Butchers and the Land Raider Spartan, as the 3 power axe wielding members of the squad couldn't penetrate the hull, we started with the Devoured. The Devoured did 2 penetrating hits and a single glancing hit, causing 3 hull points of damage, the left sponson mount being destroyed and the tank being stunned. World Eaters ended turn 4 review. It's been a good turn again. The Dreadnoughts are still proving a bit of a thorn in the World Eater side because they just don't want to die. Managed to score another victory point from continuing to keep hold of the central objective. Unfortunately, the Deathwing Knights seem to lead a charmed life, and they've been unable to kill off the final 2 members of the squad. And the Land Raider Spartan is probably nullified for a turn, which is a good result also. The Interemptor squad's been significantly blunted this turn, losing 8 members, and hopefully next turn we should be able to finish off the other members of the squad.
Dark Angels turn 5 movement has seen the Spartan back up in order to try to get some shots off against those Red Butchers. The Inner Circle Knights, in the last act of defiance, have stormed forward, ready to position themselves for a charge against the World Eaters. And then the Interemptor squad has just stood still and faced their plasma towards those Red Butchers in a final attempt to try to get rid of them. Dark Angels turn 5 shooting started with the Spartan assault tank shooting its las cannon using machine spirit towards the Red Butchers and getting 2 hits, but not managing to get through that invulnerable save. The heavy bolter, the snapshot, failed to wound. Inner Circle Knights were next to shoot, targeting the tactical squad with their plasma casters at AP2. With the 4 shots, 2 managed to wound, and the Apothecary failed to save them. Next squad for the Dark Angel shooting was the Intrepiders, which shot their plasma burners towards the Red Butchers, only getting a 1 on the D3 this time, shooting 4 shots between them and causing 1 wound, which was saved by the invulnerable save. Last to shoot was the Leviathan and Contempt Dreadnoughts. The Leviathan shooting its storm cannon towards the Cestus, scoring 2 hits out of the 6 shots, but failing to penetrate that front armour. And the Contemptor with heavy bolter towards the javelins, failing to get through that armour as well with his 3 shots. Dark Angels turn 5 assault phase saw the Inner Circle Knights charge against the tactical squad. Overwatch saw no wounds to the Inner Circle Knights, who managed to get in. Initiative 4 combat step now. The Inner Circle Knights struck with 6 attacks and killed 2 Marines.
World Eater striking in Initiative 4 against the Inner Circle Knights. It was 24 attacks, which led to 17 wounds, and of those 17 wounds, 4 failed to save, leading to the destruction of the unit of Inner Circle Knights. The World Eaters then consolidated 2 inches.
End of turn 5 for the Dark Angels. Try to make that defiant last stand in the face of the World Eaters. The Inner Circle have now fell in combat, which is the more honourable way to go, as what's left remain in defiance.
World Eater's turn 5 movement phase. In this turn, World Eater is going to try and eradicate the Dark Angels from the battlefield. And to that end, a lot of the units have stayed in position, such as the Cestus and the Land Speeders, trying to take out the Dreadnoughts. The Red Butchers have advanced towards the Interemptors, hoping for a final combat. The Land Speeders have turned around in an attempt to take out the Rhino, which has been weaponless all game. The large tactical squad is trying to take a second objective towards the end of the game, having no viable targets otherwise. And the Red Butchers are trying to cause the final damage to the Land Raider along with the help of the Cestus Assault Ram in order to take out the heavy tank before the Dark Angels have a final chance to react with it. Turn 5 World Eater shooting phase opened up with the Cestus firing at the 2 Dreadnoughts again. The Magna Melter managed to penetrate the hull of the Contemptor Dreadnought, causing a stunned result and leading to the loss of a hull point, but once again it failed to penetrate the heavy front armour of the Leviathan Dreadnought. The Land Speeders then opened up at the Leviathan Dreadnought, firing multi-melters to the rear armour. Once again, the Land Speeders were inaccurate, failing to hit with both weapons. They then opened up with the last cannons, causing a glancing hit, which the save was failed for and caused the loss of the last hull point of the Dreadnought, leading to it being wrecked. The second squadron of Javelin and Land Speeders opened up at the stricken Rhino, managing to take a single hull point off with their crack missiles, and the heavy bolters unfortunately just patted off the armour. So the second Cestus Assault Ram fired its Magna Melter at the Land Raider Spartan, which had only a single hull point remaining. This time managed to penetrate the armour, causing an exploded result, which managed to hit all of the Red Butchers, who fortunately made their armour saves. World Eater's combat phase, turn 5. The Red Butchers on the left flank charged towards the Interemptors, who fired at them with Overwatch for 4 shots, unfortunately failing to hit with each shot, and the charge hit home. On the right flank, the Red Butchers, who were previously attempting to assault the Land Raider Spartan, which had exploded before them, diverted their attention to the Rhino, making a huge 11-inch charge behind themselves. Fueled by combat stims, they made it across the battlefield and into contact with the Rhino. World Eater's turn 5 combat phase. The Red Butchers assaulted the Rhino, which hadn't moved in the previous turn, so all of their attacks hit automatically, ripping through the armour multiple times, causing an explodes result and causing wounds on 2 of the Red Butchers, who passed their armour saves. The Red Butchers followed up their previous combat phase with the Interemptors, who were unable to penetrate the Red Butchers' armour. The Red Butchers then went on to butcher the entire squad and consolidated 6 inches away towards the Leviathan and Contemptor Dreadnoughts. World Eater's end of turn 5 review. Once again, a good all-round turn, but unfortunately the World Eaters failed in their objective to take out the Dreadnoughts. The Dreadnoughts are surrounded in the centre of the battlefield at the moment, and the World Eaters managed to claim a second objective with the second tactical squad. We'll have to see if the battle continues, to see if the World Eaters push on in attempt to finish off the remaining Dreadnoughts.
Potentially the end of turn 5 now, as the game type allows for the dice roll to decide if we play to turn 6. So on a 4+, we'll go to turn 6, anything less, and that's it at the end of turn 5. Rolling now. And we go to turn 6. Dark Angels, turn 6. The only action in this phase was the immobilised Contemptor to shoot at those javelins again, scoring 1 hit with his shaken mode at the moment and not getting through the armour at all. It's the end of the turn for the Dark Angels, turn 6. Got 1 model left on the table. We're just trying to hold out against the tide of white in that last stand of defiance.
World Eaters turn 6 movement phase. The World Eaters this turn have decided to try and get to the other side of the Contemptor Dreadnought and attempt to attack the rear armour, with the Cestus moving out of the way so that the Land Speeders can get in position. Other units haven't moved at all because there's only a single unit left to attack, and they're not in range to make a difference at this moment in time. World Eaters turn 6 shooting phase. The Land Speeders opened up with the multi-melters, and miraculously the Dreadnought managed to save with its automatic shielding, but it wasn't so lucky against the las cannons, which caused a penetrating hit, taking its last hull point and wrecking the Dreadnought. that's the end of the game. We're going to come back to you with the victory points.
That is the end of the game. Dark Angels and World Eaters. I think it's fair to say that the World Eaters have won the game, but we are going to delve into those victory points and work out what's happened. But first, let's get an initial reaction from both of our players here. Stuart, just give me a very brief overview of your game.
Yeah, I mean, just did the Dark Angel thing of sticking until the end. There's a couple of critical moments that just didn't happen. Tried to recover, and it just that white horde of walking men stopped it.
We'll come to them in a second. Andy, what do you got for me? A pretty good sweep for you.
Absolutely. I think it started badly when the Assault Squad and Champion ran off the board at the start of the game. But more than made up for it in the second turn when probably the most choice of me reserves arrived. And the cherry on top was when the Inner Circle failed that charge, which really underpinned the whole response after that and led to a lot of the big kills as the game went on.
Yeah, there was some really great combat towards the end of the game. But let's do the victory points. We will start with the Dark Angels. And Stuart, you scored a massive 0, unfortunately.
It happens sometimes.
Oh, that's rough. I mean, let's remind ourselves, we had Dominion, so scored a point at the beginning of each turn for objective. The Dark Angels were struggling to score those victory points. No Warlord, no attrition, so unfortunately Dark Angels are 0. But Andy, what an amazing score you've got. You were consistently scoring objective points all the way through the game. So totally got 2, 4, 6, 7 VPs for the Dominion objective. Then you got a D3 for attrition, D3 for Warlord, and then D3 for Covenant of Death. Stuart, just explain to us what Covenant of Death is.
Dark Angels Legion rules. Covenant of Death is one of the rules that is you have to play to it a little bit. Which basically, if my opponent has more, or the Dark Angels opponent has more models and units left than you, they automatically get D3 victory points for it.
Yeah, equal or more. So unlucky, but Andy, you get to roll 3 D3. This is very exciting. What you got?
2 2s and a 3, which is 7.
So final score 0 to the Dark Angels and 14 to the World Eaters. So congratulations, World Eaters! What an amazing game.
Thank you.
Thank you. Where to start? I'm going to add my 2 cents worth first. I think you were right, Andy. The failed charge on the Inner Circle Knights. I think you needed a 3-inch or a 4-inch charge to it, but it was failed because we're going through difficult terrain coming out of that Spartan. That's the problem with having tons of troops in a Spartan. They can't come out the assault ram. They've got to come out the sides, and if you're hard up against cover, they take the -2 for going for cover. So that was really unfortunate. I just love the fact that the World Eaters towards the end just completely encircled the Dark Angels and had targets on every single unit pretty much and just took them down by sheer weight of attrition, which was quite interesting. Andy, we are going to start with you, the victor. Tell me a little bit about your game.
I did feel on the back foot early on. I like to get the first turn with the World Eaters and get a move in early on, get me away from the baseline, stop units running off the board. I'm not someone who tends to use Legion Vexillas and things to prevent that from happening, but I did have a fearless unit, a couple of fearless units in this game, which really helped. It's better my units being in combat and not freed up to be shot at, so that really made a difference. I think I had a number of star performers in the game. I'd never used the Contemptor Quartus Dreadnoughts before, and they ripped into the Knights early on, which more than kill them off, prevented those Knights from fighting my other units, which they were good at fighting. So that was really important. And the Knights cheap units, and I'll definitely be using them again. The Red Butchers on both flanks were pretty stellar, really. They did what they were supposed to do. They actually survived the game as well, which is a bit of a first, really. Assault Marines, bit of a mixed bag because one unit was obviously gone very early. The second unit took out a squadron of Predators, which I would say they paid for themselves in that. But I think the thing that anyone who's a World Eaters player needs to remember is this. To me, there's 2 core things to World Eaters, and one is the use of your Legion rule and making sure you've got plenty of tactical Marines to do that with, and in good high numbers in the squad so you can absorb the casualties because you're going to take them, unless you want to go with big transports. And the second is have good apothecaries. And I have
I wonder if we were going to get onto these.
I have the best apothecaries in the game. I've only got 2, but the amount of saves they make, there's something else. And I think it's fair to say the game would, I would have probably been a bit different if I'd failed a few more feel no pains. And that's not Stu's fault. That's that's just the dice gods ultimately. So
we've seen that a lot recently. Apothecaries have done an amazing job keeping breaches, assault marine units, taking the blood angels we saw recently. You think a 5-up feel no pain isn't worth having, but it's actually really, really good, and we've seen such great results from it as well.
Yeah, I'd say points economics. If you're going to pay 25 points for an Iron Halo on one guy, then you can pay 45 for 5+ on 20 guys.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Stuart, let's have a talk about your game. My only criticisms of your game, and it's not a bad one at all, is maybe I just felt that you could have kept a bit more range between you and the World Eaters. I don't know. You had the range in your weapons, though, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I had that range definitely in my game. And early off, I utilised it, and we got rid of the Assault Marines, and they ran. I think, as Andy pointed out quite rightly, the critical moment was I went with the Inner Circle Knights against the Assault Marines to stop them getting to those Predators, and I failed that charge, which left that massive gap. And from there, it felt like a backfight. I just felt that from there it was a pushback rather than anything. And as Andy said quite rightly, the amount of 5+ he's been rolling for Feel No Pains, it's incredible. But it was a good game.
I think you're a bit lucky as well. Both Content and the Leviathan got immobilised quite early on. They do have a restricted field of fire, and they were geared up for close combat. They had a bit of a shooting weapon and an assault weapon, but to have them nullified quite early on in the game was pretty tough, I felt, because both of those units could have taken on anything in the World Eaters list, but they just didn't get there, did they? Yeah, no,
they get immobilised early on, and then they just tried to stand there and give their field of fire. You're quite right in saying they've both got combat weapons, and they are designed to deal with squads that get near the tanks and the front lines.
They were almost back to back, weren't they?
Helping each other out. We did sit back to back, trying to fight everything off till the last turn. To be fair to the Contemptor, I think they weren't mobilised because there's some different things there, especially in that middle section.
And also as well, in the Inner Circle Knights, we've got cataphractii armed equipped models, but they can fire Overwatch, which is really interesting with their plasma caster strength 4 AP2. And then the larger squads, the Intremptor. Sorry, I'm mixing.
We've been trying to name it all day, to be
fair. They put out some reasonable shots, didn't they?
I think definitely with the Dark Angel's plasma, it's something unique we haven't seen before, because it is across the board. It's strength 4 AP2. So you're not getting that high strength, but the Cataphractii Inner Circle Knights can Overwatch with it, and there's 2 shots apiece. And especially that squad, if you can get out that tank, it is 1d3 for the whole squad, but if you roll that 3, they can shoot pretty much anything off the table. It's just about getting close with them.
And we talked, all three of us, when we had a bit of a break earlier, we always talked about the Inner Circle Knights. They've got really great swords. They're Tyrannic great swords, +2 strength. They're only AP3, and I kind of felt that maybe the Inner Circle, they need an AP2 weapon, but I guess they've got it in the Plasma Caster. Is that the correct term?
Yes, Plasma Caster.
They've got it in the Plasma Caster as they charge in, but when it comes to taking out other Terminators or a 2+ armour, they need an AP2 weapon, don't they?
I mean, with the Inner Circle Knights, you can take the Thunder Hammers. I've always loved my knights with swords, is one of the things. You can take the Thunder Hammers with them, but those Tyrannic Greatswords, once they get stuck in, and especially against Marines, which I was trying to do with the Assault Squad, it's devastating.
I guess, but to me though, they're such an iconic model of the Dark Angels. I kind of want their swords to be AP2 because that's kind of the iconic weapon of the army, and I don't want to have to put Thunder Hammers on a model which, in theory, should be armed with a sword to make it, I wouldn't say competitive, but to sort of make it on par with any other Terminator unit that's got an AP2 weapon in combat. So that to me just feels a bit of a...
We haven't got the book yet, but...
True.
I do wonder, I've always felt that the Dark Angels have units that have a job. So, each unit has quite a specific role. And I mean, I'm not sure these are new, but is their role not to take out massed infantry at the moment?
Well, I guess because they're Tyrant Great Sword and the instant death, they're for taking down beasts, so they'd be fantastic as Mechanicum.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I would take Cataphracti over a squad of those, but the problem is they look so good, and with the swords like you've modelled them as, I don't know, it's a tough one.
That's it for me. This army is very much about, because we spoke about this, I love my swords. I love the knight feel of the army, so it just feels right to have them, and the robes, the shoulder pads, they do feel like that knight unit. And it does show definitely today that sometimes, coming against those Terminator units, you do have that kind of hitting the brick wall with those Tyrannic Great Blades. Yeah,
it's a real chick one, and it's such a shame that they didn't perform too well. But we go back to it saying all the time, Andy's Invulnerable Inferno same sides were absolutely spectacular. So it was just amazing seeing those dice rolls come off every time. All right, that's enough for the game. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Those two armies on the board looked absolutely fantastic together. You got the white and the black of each army, and it looked fantastic. Now, gents, I know you've got a big following at your club, and you do some Instagram. So can you tell us a little bit about your club and where we can find you for your hobby efforts?
Okay, so we meet in we're called South Tyneside Tabletop Games Club, and we meet in South Shields at Trinity Centre. We've been running for about, in various guises, over 30 years, but the current iteration of the club's probably been running about a decade or so. We have a big Heresy following. We do play other games. Anything kind of goes in our place. We're very fortunate that we happen to have all our own terrain and even games funded by the club and the memberships. Every member has a say, casts a vote in AGMs and things every year about what we buy next. Everyone contributes to the painting of things. We run tournaments for Heresy, Warhammer Underworlds, and anything anybody else really wants to play. And we're always open to new members, and we've got plenty of room because we're fortunate enough to have the entirety of a community centre on a Sunday afternoon from 2 till 9:30.
Yeah, it blew me away the amount of space and the time you've got available to play games is unbelievable. So, and you've also got an Instagram page, is that right?
We do, again under South Tyneside Tabletop, and we post members' figures. We sometimes post photographs of our games and tournaments, events. And Stu, you have a...
I do. So at the moment, I've just started getting into a bit of painting for other people, just to paint those models that I've always wanted to paint, but don't want to own myself is the best way to say it. And that's Titans Workshop on Instagram. So I've been posting stuff up there that I've got the opportunity to paint some lovely models, which has been really fun. And I think some ways it just, it lets you paint some other legions, which might be a bad thing because later in life, you might find something you love there.
Well, sometimes it's a bit of a palette cleanser, isn't it? If you've been painting one particular colour for a long time, I'm going through the same thing. I'm painting Zone Mortalis for the last month, God knows how long, and it's nice. I'm painting Sisters of Silence at the moment, so it's nice to just do a practice Sisters here and there.
It's that change, isn't it? It's definitely that change, and it does help.
Yeah.
And keep you motivated.
It's good. Now before we go, just one quick reminder. Let's not forget that the book 9. I'll get that right. Crusade was up for pre-order yesterday. So again, you may think the timings were bad. It's just we had no idea when the book was released, so we wanted to get a game with the Dark Angels in. But it gives us a great opportunity to film a game pre-book 9, and then post-book 9. So if we can tempt Stuart back, we might get Dark Angels back. Because I think you mentioned you were going to bring another one of your friends along with you this time.
I think I know one of the club members who wanted to come and was on holiday. And I think it might be a bit of a Thamus because he does Night Lords. So I think there'll be a bit of grudge and rivalry there. But I think it'll be definitely something that we can look into.
I'm going to lend him the apothecaries.
Doesn't need the apothecaries. Does not need them.
That's going to be a long drive back to Newcastle. All right. Well, we will endeavour to set that up for you so we can get pre and post book 9, which would be fantastic.
Of course.
Gents, thank you so much for your efforts. I've really enjoyed today. And I tell you, you've gone through in double quick time and your narration and everything else was fantastic. So I really appreciate your efforts there.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. And, I hope you've enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure and an experience, definitely.
Good. Well, that sounds good. We might be able to get him back. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this game as much as I have. And we'll see you in the next one.